I actually joined Webflow when I was at the beginning of my third trimester. So I actually had a board meeting on a Thursday night. And then the next morning I went in for a checkup. And they're like, how are you feeling? I was like, good, just crampy. And they're like, you're in labor.
Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Lacey Kessler. I am on the education and community team here at Webflow, and I am thrilled to introduce you to our very special guest, Jay-Z. Jay-Z is our VP of Product here at Webflow and is a graduate level lecturer at Stanford University. Before Webflow, she helped scale products for major tech companies like Dropbox, WeWork, and Airbnb. She's joining us to share about her journey, what she's learned along the way, and to give you some helpful insight into product and why it's so important. Welcome, Jay-Z.
Hi, Lacey. It's so great to be here.
Great. I am so glad that you are here. There's so much about your story and your journey that I cannot wait to jump into. So let's go.
Let's do it.
All right. So you're VP of Product now at Webflow. You have an amazing resume, stellar accolades. And I'm curious, is this the path that you always imagined for yourself?
Definitely not. I mean, when I was in college, I honestly didn't even know that product management was a role. I was an econ major. I thought I was going to go and work in energy economics. Growing up in an Asian household, I was like, you can be an engineer, you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor. I will say my parents never pushed me, but it was just one of those things where you just had no idea that this was actually a field. And so, for me to be here now doing what I'm doing, I love what I'm doing, but it was definitely not something that I anticipated.
Wow, that's really incredible. So what were you doing when you made that transition then?
Yeah, so when I graduated, I actually joined a consulting firm. But even there, I felt like something was really missing. I felt like I was advising, and I wanted to be on the other side of the table where essentially I was actually making decisions. I was actually building. And at the time, gaming was really taking off. And what those companies wanted were people who could actually almost run a mini economy, do a lot of analysis and figure out, how do we build this game? How do we get people to be engaged? And it was almost like when I studied microecon, I was like, when am I ever going to use this? Well, turns out when you balance a game economy, you use microecon. So I joined a mobile gaming company called Pocket Gems, and I did product there. And it was honestly an amazing experience. It was a very small company, 30 people. So I got to just really learn what it was like to be at a startup. And so I got to ship literally every single week, which was an amazing learning experience. And I was just with a very small group of people and ultimately, learning all the things I didn't know, but leveraging the things I did know.
Absolutely. So with that, did you find that transition difficult going from you had a set path or something more concrete, and then you shifted not even just industries, but complete focuses into something else?
It was definitely difficult. I walked in and I would be like, I know nothing about building anything. I know nothing about mobile development. And in fact, a lot of people didn't at the time. Again, it was very new. I was learning a lot. I literally was like, what is game design? I don't even play games. I was like, I probably should go download some mobile games and, maybe ask my friends. So it was definitely a huge learning curve. But honestly, learning for me is just so exciting that I felt invigorated that I was learning all these new things all the time in my job.
Absolutely. So with that, being a woman in tech, going, transitioning across industries, how did that feel confidence-wise? Did you feel equipped to do that? Or was it one of those things this is just what I'm going to do. I'm just jumping in and see how it goes.
Yeah. I definitely experienced a ton of imposter syndrome. And it was very scary, honestly, because I was like, wow, how am I going to hold my own with all these people who studied CS and, all these, very technical engineers. But I was like, if I'm not uncomfortable, if I don't push myself, I'm never going to get over this. And so when I joined Dropbox, I actually asked to work on what I thought was the most technical product of the entire company, which essentially were the developer APIs. I was like, I don't even know what APIs stand for, but I'm going to Google it and I'm going to learn it. And so that's what I did. And I really just wanted to push myself to get over that imposter syndrome. Yes.
So do you feel like that's something you deal with today as a VP now?
I think, honestly, everyone, no matter what stage in your career you're in, you're always going to be dealing with some degree of can I do this? Like, I've never done this before. Because at the end of the day, for most people, what you're doing on a daily basis is something you've never tackled before. It's important to just ground yourself in this concept of like, you have value to add. And even if you're feeling like this is a new challenge or you're uncomfortable, in fact, it's probably you who has that most in your head versus anyone else around you. I think that over the years, what is really important is that knowing that everyone experiences it and also knowing that you can overcome it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming to Jay-Z's TED Talk. That was incredible. So then do you feel that it's important to have a CS degree going into tech?
I don't, actually. I think I encourage people to study whatever it is that they have passion for. And in fact, that's actually what Webflow is all about, which is why I'm so excited to be working on a company like Webflow with our mission. And all of these things in many ways are applicable to tech as a broader industry, right? When I think about the product management role, part of it is, being able to understand some of these technical concepts, but that's not the core. The core is actually understanding your users. The core is understanding the business need and merging all of these things together. And so if you have a CS degree, that's great. You can bring in certain things that you will learn in that discipline, but there are so many other disciplines that have so many other pieces that are important to the role. So I don't think it's a prerequisite, and lots of people can be successful without a CS degree.
Right. Okay. So I have so many follow-up questions here.
Okay.
First, let's start off. What is product? Can you give us like an overview for those who are like not sure how it fits with design, engineering, other roles within tech? How does product fit in?
Yeah. What that usually means is in order to do something great for your users, in order to build something great, you have to fundamentally understand what their problems are, what their needs are. You have to understand how to deliver them a solution that is simple and elegant and not super costly to build, right? Because you want to deliver value as quickly as possible. It's the product manager's role to define what does success look like and also what is the biggest problem we're trying to solve. From there, design and engineering can play their roles. Design partners closely with product to really envision that solution. And by the way, that also includes engineering. The how do you do this thing? How do we solve this problem? What is the thing we're going to build? That is a big collaboration between the three functions. But ultimately, going back to the product role, you are accountable for making sure your team gets over the finish line and your users have something delightful and usable. And finally, you're driving business impact.
Wow. No pressure though. No pressure.
It's a team sport.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. So how do you get into product? What does it look like to begin your first product role?
Yeah. I think it was a lot more challenging in the past, and I'm actually really happy to see that it has become more accessible. Is it the most accessible thing? No, but again, before it was literally like you had to have a CS degree to even get an interview. Today, there are lots of people from all these disciplines who end up in the product role. But it has been a personal passion of mine, and the reason why I teach is because I think that it is so important to actually create tools and ways for people to essentially navigate that process in a way that is a lot easier than it used to be. Today, there are literally organizations, right? Like Girls Who Code. There are classes specifically on product management. I teach a class on product management, and it just gives more people access to the learnings that you need in order for you to be successful and break into the product role.
Mm-hmm. And then, so when you're teaching, you're a lecturer at Stanford, what is that experience like for your students? What kind of things are you covering and learning within your course?
Yeah, product is, in my head, more of a way of thinking. Our belief is really starting with some of the first principles. How do we get people to start thinking in a different way? And then getting them to do as much hands-on experience as possible so they can put into practice some of this thinking. We do a project all semester long. And through that project, they're literally going out there, they're talking to faculty on campus, they're talking to other students. They're really engaging with people as though they're real users. They are writing out what they would actually want to build for those people as a way to simulate what it would look like to be a product manager.
So with the class that you teach at Stanford, those people going into the product class, do they have experience with product before generally? Is it something they're exploring? Like, how do they kind of find their way to you?
Yeah. It's actually really important to me that we take people who don't have experience. because if you have experience, you've gotten some of that learning. Our class is in the graduate school of MS&E, so it's management, science, and engineering. And so we actually want to take people from all over. So there are people who apply from the medical school, the law school, the business school, from undergrad, and we want to take as many people from all the different schools as possible. And the last thing that's really important to me, very important to me actually, is just maintaining a really strong gender ratio. I think it's so easy, and the first year we taught the class, literally 80% of the applicants were male. And it made sense in the sense that it was in the engineering school. But it's so important to me to equalize that playing field. And so we went out and we actually had our teaching assistant go to these clubs and all the places on campus where there were these women who were really excited about building and learning and really advertising the class to them. And so even in the first year, we were able to maintain a 50-50 gender ratio. And actually, in the past couple of years that we've been teaching, it's really swung the other way. I think in the last class I just taught, 70% of our students were female, which is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's almost unheard of. Like, you don't really hear those numbers skew like that when it comes to tech-oriented type paths.
It's true today, but I don't see a world where it should have to be that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So talk to me about why is this so important to you? Why is this something that you want to talk about it? You want to make sure it happens in everything that you're doing. This is something that's implemented.
Diverse teams build the best products. Having that diversity, even in thought, in background, meant we could challenge each other and challenge our assumptions. And that's how you ultimately really, really deeply understand your users and then push your team to build the best thing possible.
I think it's really, really beautiful how you said that diverse teams build better products. And that makes me think about what that's like in your day-to-day with the work that you do and your team is doing. How are you removing those barriers to build for the web?
Today, literally 1% or less of the world has right access to the web. And we want to make it so that that could be everyone. And I definitely fall in that 99% that without something like Webflow, without tools like that, would not have right access to the internet.
Why is it important that women even look and consider tech as an option?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people inherently want to build things, right? In the same way that I, moved from consulting into product because I wanted to build, and I wanted to build in a specific way. I personally didn't necessarily want to code, but I wanted to build in terms of working with a team and getting a product out there. Like, I think a lot of people are really motivated by that. And so, if you want, just creating avenues for that to be true, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So visual development means something even more to you than just building it. It's also like you're building a tool for someone almost like you because you don't have that coding background. You just said you didn't want to, but yet you can go to Webflow
absolutely.
and spin that up really quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. And it's also just the amount of time, right, that you spend. So if you're spending less time in the kind of like the guts of the standing something up, there's more time for creativity. There's more time for what you might want to do and what the business you want to build on top of it. You're building a website in order to accomplish something, right, to do something. And so all of those things can come to life.
I think I was continuously taken back to how incredible I think it is of the work that you're doing, the impactful work that you're doing, and then how that also you are teaching at Stanford or lecturing at Stanford, excuse me, and how that is shaping and molding people to come up and have a really holistic perspective of product. And then also with being a mom, in my opinion, I think being a mom is the hardest job.
It is the hardest job, 100%.
That there is, yes. It's the hardest free job you do that you don't get a break
And
from.
you have two.
Right, yes.
I only have one.
Yeah, and I've got, I think about that, and even just what it means to be here. I have two girls, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And my 7-year-old has been able to code her first video game using visual development.
Yeah.
And I think about what does that mean as I'm, one of my passions is bringing women into tech, into visual development, because I see it as such a way out of poverty, out of dependencies, out of they can make their lives, their careers in this. And when I see another mom in the space as well, it just gives me this sense of you see it too. You see the importance. You see why we have to push forward. And it's hard. Like balancing kids and all that can be really challenging.
Yeah.
But we make it work, and we do it alongside other moms and within community. And I'm just curious what that experience has been like for you, because I know you're a new mom-ish.
Yeah.
And you're in this big role. Like how has that been navigating all of this?
It's just honestly trying to survive day by day, right? And knowing like this is what's important to me and this is what I want to make time for. So specifically for me, making sure I'm literally available every single night for bedtime. That puts certain constraints on like what dinners I go to, board events or anything like that. But it is so important to me to be there for him every single night to put him down. I'm still nursing, right? And that's a journey in itself. You know, even though we are all remote, you still got to turn off the camera if you're gonna nurse.
Yes.
And so just like knowing the things that are important to you, doing them anyways because they're important to you, but also finding, like to your point, the communities that support you. At Webflow, it is totally fine for me to be like, look, I'm going to take this meeting via phone call because at the end of the day, I need to do these things at the same time, or I do need to nurse at the same time. And so I actually joined Webflow when I was at the beginning of my third trimester. So I had truly, 90 days to onboard before I was forced to go out on maternity leave. And I actually remember a moment where I actually had a board meeting on a Thursday night where I was like, look, this is like what I've observed. These are the things I'd like to, these are the things I put in place. These are the things I'd like to, continue while I'm out. And then the next morning I went in for a checkup and they're like, how are you feeling? I was like, good, just crampy. And they're like, you're in labor. And so, just like, again, that balance, it's so difficult. It's basically impossible, but knowing what are the pieces, right? And so, yeah.
Exactly. It's like a tightrope.
Yeah.
But then I love that it's also fueled by this passion of like, this is equally important. Like you don't have to do the trade-offs of like, am I going to be like a mom or like career focused? It's like you can be both. And it's important to your own personal, like your own person needs that development, needs that interaction, needs that stimulation, that building for your own worth. And that's then also showing like it's okay to have priorities and boundaries and set these things up for yourself so that you can succeed.
I think it's like one of those things where you do deal with adversity where you go into a room and you're like, the only woman here, that's great. But you kind of like, there's that extra push to keep going because you're like, if I don't do this, it is going to be harder and harder for other people because they won't see this being done, right? And so I think this goes back to, being a mom. It's like, it's really hard to be a mom and to be working full time and teaching and all these other things, but it is really important that I continue doing these things as much as I would love to spend, more time with my son because if you can't look around and literally be like, oh, well, there's Arquay and there's Jay-Z and there's all these other people, they're doing these things, it's just harder to see yourself being able to do it too, right? And so I think that's really that's like, I think it probably fuels both Arquay and I.
And I think it's so important for the girls in this program, not even just to this program, but everywhere to see this, to see what it looks like to even be balancing, like you are a lecturer, you're a VP, and you're a mom. And that's a lot to juggle, even as we were talking about before, and like just, getting ready for this, of doing all of those things. Yeah. And it's really hard. It can be done. It may not be like, have a little bow on it and everything looks pretty and perfect. Yeah. But that's also like living your life and doing what fuels you. Yeah. So it's so important to see that.
For every person who ends up making that choice to go into technology, they are going to become that too. When people are looking to go into tech and they're thinking to themselves, is this for me? Can I do it? Having more of the people who look like them in all these other roles, being like, you can be a designer, you can be an engineer, you can be an engineering manager, engineering leader, product leader, community leader, like all of these things enable people to feel that added boost of confidence of like, this is also for me.
Exactly. And to me, it's like, I feel like I'm like almost like falling in love again with tech through just this conversation of like, we're paving a way that's going to be more inclusive, more diverse, and how how that's going to open up to so many different people.
Yeah. Tech is really over the years, it's just going to grow. It's going to be everywhere. So this line of like, I'm in tech, I'm not in tech, that's going to get blurred. Because at the end of the day, like most companies will need a digital presence. Most companies will need some degree of technology to survive. Companies or even like nonprofits, organizations, anything really. And so I think that even reminding yourself of that, of like, what is tech anyways? I think is really important. And then to your point of like all of these experiences are valuable. Going back, I know we talked a lot about the product manager role. The most important skill set is not how technical you are. The most important skill set of a product management role is truly communication. Can you communicate clearly to your users? Can you understand them? Can you then communicate to your team? Can you motivate your team? Can you explain why we're doing what we're doing to your team? Can you actually empower your team to go figure out the solution? Because you will not always have all the answers. It's communication, and that's just a universally human skill set. And it's not like a very specific, I need to learn X or have this particular thing that I've done or on my resume.
So for the girls who are in Girls Who Code, what words would you have to share with them as encouragement as they're just kind of finding their way?
I would say, honestly, there are so many different roles. Technology is evolving, and you're going to be part of that evolution and driving a lot of the evolution. The world really is going to look different in the future. There's going to be so many more tools out there, so many more ways you can be in technology. And so I guess my words of encouragement are, if you're passionate about it, go for it.
I love that. That's simple, succinct. And if they have action behind that, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Jay-Z, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing about your background, how you got into tech, how all of this works together, what product even is. I'm really, really appreciative.
Honestly, it's so much fun. Thank you so much.